All right, well, let's get started. We had over 80 people registered. It looks like we have about 40, maybe 44 on right now, and so there'll be others trickling in, I'm sure. But to kick things off, I wanted to wish everybody a happy World Soil Day. And I'm very grateful that we're able to kick off this webinar mini series on this occasion. So my name is John Winston. I'm an agricultural economist. I work with a nonprofit organization called Winrock International. We are very happy to be part of a collaborative team in the Climate Smart Caribbean project, which is coordinated by the Caribbean Climate Hub. And you'll hear a little bit more about that from Dr. Bill Gould in a minute. Um, but one of the Winrock roles in this Climate Smart Caribbean project was to try to facilitate the creation of the Caribbean Soil Health Learning Network. And so we have been meeting quarterly and having some presentations and some discussion and trying to get some things off the ground with the ultimate goal of sharing information to facilitate greater implementation of practices that can improve soil health. And more recently, we have been in contact with and are starting to communicate more regularly with our colleagues in Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. And so this webinar mini-series is our first activity together. And we're hoping that this is going to help launch some collaborative opportunities across the two tropical regions of the US. And so I welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm very glad that folks were able to get in, and I hope everyone successfully who's trying to log in can successfully. We're going to have a couple of more introductory comments, and then we're going to have two presenters, and we're going to reserve some time for discussion in the end. I hope people will have questions, and if they do, they can put them. We're going to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom, and India will say a little bit more about that. And I also wanted to mention that there are translation services available into Spanish for this. And in order to access that, you want to go to, in the bottom panel of the Zoom screen, there's a More button. And when you hit that, you should see an interpretation button. And from there, you can get into the English or the Spanish channel, depending on which language you want to hear this in. So let me turn it over to India Clark from Hawaii for some further welcome comments.
Aloha kako. Again, my name is India Clark, and I see quite a few people on this call that are from our Hawaii Soil Health Network. And so we're very excited to be engaging in this initial webinar series as a way to start expanding our network to tropical regions, so Hawaii and Puerto Rico. We've also been fortunate to work with Guam a little bit. I work as our Farm and Community Engagement Coordinator for our local Research and Conservation Development Council. And as part of that, we started this Soil Health Network, really producer-led and really focused on peer learning and supporting more technical, just provide more technical support and sharing practices, including traditional practices. And that was funded through a cooperative agreement with NRCS Pacific Islands area. And a lot of that focused on looking at how to implement some of the NRCS Soil Health Division programming through soil health management plans and soil health testing. And much of that was with Dr. Jonathan Deenik's department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and he'll be one of our speakers today. And that lab work has really been huge for us, and it wasn't available. So he will share of that process for developing our soil health indicators that could work for our soils. And so really a lot of our soil health network has really focused on what do we know about our soils, and how do we compare where we're at to develop a baseline to other similar soil orders, just under different management, and understanding the historical use, and much under former sugar plantation and pineapple. A lot of the producers in our network grow specialty crops, including coffee, cacao, macadamia nut, breadfruit, mango, avocado, banana, dryland and wetland kalo, and some market garden crops. So we're really hoping that we have a lot of similarities here in both the specialty crops we work with, the properties, the soils that we manage, and also just the need to have those guidelines, those indicators to know where we're at, and how do we improve and measure that improvement over time. So that's largely been what our soil health network has been focused on, and through that was farmer cohorts. So cohort-based trainings on each island with farmers sharing different practices, sharing equipment, and then also working closely with the soil health reports that Dr. Deenik will share later. So I will go ahead and kind of conclude the Q&A function. Johnny had mentioned that I could share a little on that. This is a button at the bottom, a panel. It just helps us all see the questions at once. Panelists cannot add questions, but attendees, if we have somebody that's brave, would want to pose one question, this is a way that questions can be posed and viewed by all as the discussions, that the two presentations are going on. We will hold those questions and answer them in person during our Q&A discussion at the end. But it is a way that we can both view and rank those questions. So if you share a similar question, you can uprank that. So thank you.
Thanks, India. I'd like to thank both John Winston and India for doing a lot of the work and organizing this. I'm William Gould. I'm the director of the USDA Caribbean Climate Hub. And for those that aren't familiar with the Climate Hub Network, it's a USDA program with a series of 10 regional networks that work to bring scientific information to practitioners, work to collaborate across the USDA agencies, and try and improve climate literacy, not only in our own USDA workforce, but with our partners, and really foster the implementation of climate adaptation and mitigation actions. So this is a great opportunity to work with partners in the Pacific Islands. It was just nice, India, to hear that list of crops that are so familiar. Often I think we share the experience of working with federal agencies that focus on the continental US, and always we're kind of outliers. So this is exciting. I appreciate all the participants for joining us. I noticed I did drop the link to a map, and I see a lot of entries from the Caribbean area, but not from the Pacific Islands. So let me just drop that in the chat again, and it should cover the Pacific Islands as well. So feel free to join that map and show us where you're at. Well, I'm really pleased to welcome the first speaker, Dr. David Sotomayor. Dr. Sotomayor has collaborated on a number of occasions with the Climate Hubs, and we really appreciate him bringing his expertise to activities that we've organized, and it's been a pleasure to help him with some of his outreach and learning activities. He's got a PhD in agronomy and soils from Kansas State University, and he's a soil science professor at the College of Agricultural Sciences at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez. He teaches undergraduate, graduate courses in soils with an emphasis on soil fertility. And among his work is the development of tools that help farmers improve their on-farm nutrient management, fertilizer recommendations through science-based decisions. So it's a real pleasure to have Dr. Sotomayor here and joining us. And I will mention one more time that we do have translation services. Sí, tenemos todo en español, con la aplicación de interpretación hay un botoncito al fondo de su pantalla, and please take advantage of those services. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Sotomayor. If you'd like to share your screen.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate the opportunity to address the people in various parts of the world on an effort that I have been involved with the Hawaii group, Dr. Deenik, Dr. Crow, and others in the topic of soil health. I have been involved in this topic since it was first termed soil quality in the 90s at Kansas State, when John Doran was heavily involved in this topic. So it's been a challenge through the years, working through soil quality, now soil health. And the question that was, I guess, posed to me was monitoring and managing soil health in tropical regions. And what are the challenges that we are facing in Puerto Rico and Hawaii? And I want to see if I can cover 3 topics in this short interruption so that I can raise questions for the rest of the audience. First of all, soil health in the tropics, is it really unique or really different than in temperate areas? Is a number for a soil health indicator that of a good healthy soil in temperate areas the same numeric value as in our soils of the tropics? Second, how can we monitor soil health from a quantitative standpoint, and what it means and how to manage it? So first of all, a very quick definition: what is a healthy soil? It is one that has the capacity to carry out its functions, and because it's a living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So there are 6 basic functions, and we hope that soil health, a healthy soil, can address all 6. Possibly not. Perhaps it can work best for 3 or 4 functions, but we would hope that it addresses the most number of functions possible. Now, are tropical soils unique? Well, that's a question that has been posed for many years. And what sets apart the soils of the tropics they are basically within a geographic zone of the world. About 40% of the land area is in the tropics. 1/3 of the soils is in the tropics. They are characterized as an area that the temperature does not vary more than 5 degrees, and that it is associated principally with latitude. There are some areas that can be very dry or very wet, and areas that can be very, very cold, associated with high altitudes. The soils can be very diverse, even on a small scale, and all types of rocks can be found. So this is, almost very similar as in temperate areas. But one thing that sets us apart is the mineralogy as a result of the soil forming processes. And as in the temperate soils, we have high activity clays. Those are dominated by 2-to-1 clays or 2-to-1-to-1 clays. But also temperate zone soils have low activity clays, kyolinitic soils. The difference is that the aluminum and iron is primarily in crystal form, or in crystal form. What is in the tropics is more in the oxide form or amorphous. And PNN-CM is called poorly crystallized minerals, and those are mostly associated with volcanic soils. So here we have 2 examples of very a molly soil, very similar as in Kansas, where I went to school, and an oxy soil that is only found in the tropics. So are they unique? Well, we are unique in the soils of the tropics are unique in the sense that the processes are the same as in temperate areas, but they differ in the degree, in the intensity of the weathering process. And the type of clay or the mineralogy creates different mechanisms that the soil organic carbon can be protected from in areas of high temperature. So the mineralogy, I think, is a key factor that sets apart tropical soils and that creates conditions that are different from a soil health perspective. If we were to monitor soil health, how would we do it? You can measure almost anything in soil as you can do in water or air, but we want to test for parameters that have shown a positive relationship with conservation practices and that are associated with positive soil functions. And indifferent than in soil fertility, in which we relate the soil parameters to crop yield and crop quality, these soil health parameters may not necessarily be related to crop yield. We try to select for indicators that are easy to measure, that include some form of physical, chemical, or biological property that can be accessible to the users and that are sensitive to management. So those are what we consider good indicators. And here in this slide, you can see some of the tests that have been used throughout the hundreds, perhaps thousands, well, I would say perhaps hundreds of studies that have been done through the 90s and the 2000s on soil, first on soil quality and then on soil health, and you can explore these individual tests later. Hawaii, for example, I'm sure Dr. Deenik will talk about the soil health indicators of Hawaii. They have selected specific indicators that seem to respond well to conservation practices, and that helps distinguish between soils that have a healthy soil function and a good soil function versus others that do not have such a good soil health functioning. In order to test for these parameters, usually we need a commercial laboratory. Many of the commercial soil testing laboratories have shifted from or have added soil health tests. This was not available 5 years ago. So this is just an example, and I am not endorsing nor I have any investment in any of these laboratories. But these are some options that any person can send soil samples for soil health monitoring. So the conclusion of this second part is to select for soil health parameters that you think will respond to conservation practices positively. But I just want to make a note that we are still not sure how these parameters are related to soil and crop productivity. Finally, I want to address how are we going to manage for soil health? Well, the theory is that we can manage for improved soil health through conservation practices. And conservation practices are those that promote good soil functioning. And we have identified 4 of these 4 general practices. First, to keep the soil as much as possible. Here I have 2 examples that are of important crops grown in Puerto Rico: plantains and pineapple. Also in Hawaii, I don't know if you do many plantains, but we eat a lot of tostones and mofongo. And pineapple is characterized as being a crop that is grown in a bare soil. It takes a big beating from high temperatures and a reduced carbon input and drought, affected by drought. The second aspect that is important is breaking up the soil. You break up the soil, you stimulate soil organic matter oxidation, and that is usually associated with tillage or overgrazing by animals. The third aspect is to have as much diversity as possible. That is, have as much different plants growing, because that can have different amounts of carbon allocated to soil and different quality of carbon that will influence different soil microbial groups and eventual metabolism of these soil microbes, some of which are associated with improved with improved soil health because they can reduce the incidence of pests and diseases and improve the soil nutritional status. And finally, keep live roots growing in the soil as much as possible because a large portion of the total carbon produced by a plant is allocated below ground. So to summarize, the four factors to manage soil health are to keep the soil core, reduce the disturbance, promote ecosystem diversity, and have more roots in the soil. And I hope I have maintained my time but to give you enough information to stimulate some discussion if we have time, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sotomayor. Again, use our Q&A function for questions there, and we'll have some discussion after our second talk. I'm going to pass the floor to India Clark to introduce our next speaker.
Aloha. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Jonathan Deenik. I believe he's worked in Puerto Rico. I'll let him share a little more about that. He's the chair of the University of Hawaii at Manoa Department of Tropical Plant and Soil Sciences, which is where he completed his MS and doctorate degree. And he joined in 2003, where he served as extension, research, and instruction. So he really works on the ground, and I can attest to the fact that he's really built an amazing culture at his department with a lot of passionate soil scientists, professionals, and producers working very closely together, putting a lot of work into trials, and really looking at answering those questions as we really transition in Hawaii from plantation style agriculture into more diversified systems. He's also worked with farmers throughout not only the Hawaiian Islands, but also Micronesia. And where he's focused a lot on Pacific agroforestry systems, their management, and their role in the food system, especially looking at the rapid change and social, economic, and environmental conditions. And so without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Dr. Deenik.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody hear me? I hope. All right, very good. So aloha, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to see and hear my colleague, David. We enjoy a very fruitful partnership working across two similar but very different islands, one in the Caribbean and one in the Pacific. I'm going to share my screen at this point if I can make sure I know what I'm doing. Share. Yes, here we go. Now, okay. Let's make sure. Does everybody see my screen? Are we on track? Okay. Again, I want to start by acknowledging that what I will talk to, the little bit that I will present today is really a combination of many people's contributions. And here's just a small pictorial of some of our students and colleagues. I do want to acknowledge Dr. Crow is the second from the left at the top, and my colleague, Dr. Tai Maz, who have been instrumental in helping us move this concept of soil health forward from both a research, instruction, and extension point of view. I will quickly go over the Hawaii Soil Health Test and give a little bit of its history, and then spend a little bit of time highlighting some of the results of on-farm soil health trials. We're doing similar work, my colleague David and I, in Puerto Rico and in Hawaii, and I wanted to just point out to some specific results that we've come across. Actually, like David said, soil health was framed as soil quality back in the 90s, and sometime in the late 90s and early 2000s, it became the concept of soil health, which is really a metaphor, but that's another long story. Our work with soil health began formally in 2017, where we wanted to develop a soil health test that made sense and was appropriate for the many different soil types we find in Hawaii and that are found across the Pacific. So we didn't have much funding, but we started by collecting 66 samples across Oahu, Maui, and Molokai. We made sure we covered the primary soil orders that are dominant in the agricultural setting in Hawaii. And you can see there are quite a few of them, altisols, vertisols. I won't go through the details. And we also tried to hit as many of the different land use types. We couldn't get everything, of course. And so with these 66 samples in hand, we subjected them to 44 different indicators, biological, chemical, and physical. And we were able to use different statistical approaches and other approaches to narrow down to a soil health test composed of 10 indicators that performed well and were sensitive to management and performed across the different soil types. So I won't list each one of them, but there were biological indicators, chemical indicators, and physical indicators. And as David pointed out, these indicators needed to be feasible and interpretable. And so if you go and look at soil health tests across the nation or even the world, you will see some of these indicators being used. So they're not unique to Hawaii. They just cover the main aspects of a soil function, biological, physical, and chemical. We continuously are collecting samples, and the next step after the soil health indicators selection was to develop a scoring function. Okay, how do we integrate these 11 indicators into one number that can be easily understood by users, farmers, and other extension agents and whatnot? I don't have time to go into the actual development of that scoring function, but Dr. Maas wrote a very nice paper that summarizes it. I can put it in the chat later. But it uses a multivariate approach to allow us to get one number, which is on the left-hand y-axis, and that's the soil health score. It's a little different than others that are used on the mainland because of this multivariate approach that Dr. Maas used. Now you can see that it was quite robust in discerning differences in land use and their effect on soil health and soil health, I should say. And so this graph encompasses 805 samples across Puerto Rico, Pohnpei, which is an island in the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Hawaiian Islands. So we're confident that the test itself is able to measure differences in land use. Now, the key that we're still, of course, working on is, well, monitoring soil health over time. Can we see changes in soil health after a farmer implements a practice? That is a little bit more challenging, but we've with the assistance of the NRCS CIG program, we've received some funding to implement on-farm practices and strategies, and we're currently monitoring these. So it's a joint project with Puerto Rico and Hawaii. In Hawaii, we're mostly looking at carbon amendments, which is compost application, some diversity in cropping systems, alley cropping and whatnot, and also a little bit with cover cropping. Right now, I'm just going to share some of the results we have of the effect of compost applications and their impact on soil health. Many of the participating farms we're working with in Hawaii are conventional farmers whose practices over many decades have really decreased the carbon, soil organic matter in their soils. And so they start off with very, very low soil health scores. And so you can see here at one of our green onion farms participants at baseline, meaning the beginning of the project prior to any treatment application, soil health scores are between 0.8 and about 0.16. And we chose a relatively high application rate of compost because in these soils that have lost much of their soil organic matter, small additions of compost from previous experience really don't have much of an effect. So initially, we need quite a bit of compost to measure any changes, and so this is in a metric is 45 tons per hectare, which is equivalent of about 20 tons per acre of compost. So in our system. So the soil health scores start off very low, and with the two applications of compost, soil health score about doubles, but it doesn't seem to rise consistently, increasing after each application. We also had a treatment that looked at, the farmer was interested, well, let's see if we add more compost. And so we double the compost amount. And now you can see there is a very clear increase in soil health score, almost a tripling of soil health score. Okay, well, what's the impact on crop yield? So here, the next I'll show some impacts on the yield of green onion across time. And we have 4 harvest events, which is over about 2.5 years. And you can see there's really, it's difficult to say whether there's a clear impact on crop yield. It shows a tendency for improvement on onion yield. But really we need the more data we can get to see what this trend does. Does it go up and down as it suggests here, or do we now continue in the upward direction? With the doubling of the compost, there's looks like even a possible negative effect on crop yield, and certainly no clear positive benefit to increase onion yield by increasing your soil health score. We did the same. We have the same sort of experiment or demonstration plots with a sweet corn farmer. And in the sweet corn farm, we do see a general increase in soil health score with time. We'll probably get, within the context of this granting period, we'll get maybe 1 more harvest cycle. So we'll see if that trend continues in the upward direction. And there's a little bit of crop increase, especially after the first application, but it seems to disappear in the second application. So the yield increase is not as not very high, let's say. So the question is, well, is it practical for a farmer who's been relying on chemical fertilizers for their whole career? Does it make sense to increase soil health with compost? Well, with this onion farm, you can see we used a partial budget analysis approach, and in the 20 tons per acre treatment of compost, the small gains in soil health produced increases in crop yield and some increase in profitability. So there is some evidence that this is a sustainable practice, meaning the farmer may be able to move forward with this. When they double, of course, double the composting, it's a losing proposition. You do increase your soil health score quite a bit, but you can't produce enough crop to cover the cost of that compost. And in the corn situation, it's the same. The compost costs are basically too high in Hawaii. They're not economically sustainable for farmers. So that's just a smattering, a little peek into some of the results of our on-farm trials. A challenge that we face continuously as a lab group and our soil health group here in Hawaii is the cost and timeliness of the Hawaii soil health test. It's not cheap. Well, there are 11 indicators that are being measured, and it takes time for those indicators to be measured and then results gotten back to the producer. We're on the verge of reducing the number of indicators. So as a team, we've been reviewing, can we reduce the number of measured indicators, which would reduce the cost and increase the turnover, meaning the turnaround time. Another promising approach to soil health monitoring is the use of mid-infrared spectroscopy. There we have just submitted as a group a paper for publication that does show that this is a rapid technique that may be able to replace the laboratory approaches. Of course, the key is identification of management strategies that are effective and sustainable at the farm level. How do we improve soil health and farm profitability? Which management strategies are most appropriate? And of course, that really is by maintaining and increasing our network of participating farmers and continuing trials so that we can monitor the impacts of these different varying soil management strategies. And then, of course, as David mentioned several times, is understanding and determining, is there a relationship of soil health score to crop productivity? At the end of the day, you've got to be producing food on your field, and what's the relationship of those two? We know that with time, building soil organic matter generally does improve crop and farm sustainability. But our tests are right now, we're only in 2 to 3 years, so continuing these trials over a longer term. And we also emphasize that a soil health test must be accompanied by a soil fertility test. They need to work together to help a farmer manage both nutrients and soil organic matter. And with that, I say mahalo nui yauko, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That was very informative. And David also both provided some great information and kept into the time limits, which we appreciate. We have about 11 minutes for discussion. There are some questions accumulating in the Q&A. And India, do you have any thoughts or comments as we delve into the discussion portion? You're on mute.
I would say if we can answer if we can pose any of the questions that are applicable to both regions, that would be great. I see some very specific to Hawaii and to Puerto Rico. I think this is us trying to understand, kind of what we have that are similar. Some that are very focused on producer specific questions, and some with specialty crops with coffee. So I think just a question that maybe both speakers could answer. And the top question from Viviana was, what are some of the greatest challenges in integrating soil health concepts at farms in Puerto Rico? And I think, Dr. Deenik started touching on that. So I didn't know if there was anything that was different in Puerto Rico, if we have similarities there, but if the challenges are the same.
Yes, I think it's how to explain to the farmer what it means to them in terms of benefit, and the benefit is shown to them in terms of improved crop yield, improved crop health, or just overall ecosystem health. So there are those three things that we need to focus, and we really need to show them beyond the theory. They need to see it. We need to have continued trials, to continue to have ongoing trials to show them, because if they don't see it, they're not going to be convinced.
I think that's a great answer. And as an economist, I want to just say that, productivity is important, but as you touched on in your presentation, farm profitability is really, farmers are business people, and looking at it from a profitability standpoint, I think is really important. I know we don't have much time, so we have quite a few questions in there. So I want to move to the next one if I can, posted by Nathaniel Myers. It says, Aloha. My question relates to soil biology and mineral content in clay, heavy weathered tropical soils. Despite regular inoculations of compost tea, the benefits seem short-lived. Do either of you have any advice for application of minerals so that the biology can feed, thrive, and live long-term in the soil? I'm curious in particular about techniques like biochar, ORMUS, saltwater distillation, mineral precipitate. Great question. You guys, any thoughts?
Well, I'll give a stab at it. That's a pretty not so straightforward of a question to answer quickly. I can agree that, you know, compost tea applications, for them to be effective, need to be regular over time. And if you stop adding them, the effects may no longer be residual. They may not last long. Biochar is an interesting proposition, especially in tropical acid soils with low fertility and high acidity, because the biochar has many benefits to counteract the negative effects of acidity. We don't have a lot of field trial data in Hawaii, at least, to show if what the benefit would be. There would be a carbon benefit, and there is a lot of evidence in the literature of a biological benefit of biochar, but the field benefits are we don't have as many studies at the field scale.
Okay, I think we have another question on the soil health score. So what parameters are measured for soil performance? As in total biomass, pest, disease, I think maybe looking at field, I believe. Is it weighted for any of those factors? So I'm not sure if I'm interpreting this question correctly, but it looks like looking at beyond lab, also some field indicators.
Yeah, that's a great question. The soil health test that I presented to the audience has 10 indicators, and they're all measured in the laboratory. So there is an NRCS in-field soil health test, which does look at observable properties of a soil in the field. The test that I presented is strictly measuring biological, chemical, and physical properties of soils taken from the field and measured in the laboratory, and then condensed into a soil health score. So I don't know if I answered that question. The NRCS does have in-field soil health assessment that can be performed by, it's rather straightforward and not too difficult. Any farmer, if they have time, can actually do that.
Yes, I just want to add, some of these changes can be apparent. For example, you see change in color and you see increases in earthworm abundance. Those are two obvious things, but they take time to develop, and the soil test can give an early indicator of how things are changing.
You're on mute, John.
Thank you, Bill. Another question in the chat from Diana Guzman mentioned that there are preliminary results from biochar in Puerto Rico that has benefits for coffee plant growth and vigor. And it's believed that the capillarity of biochar can also serve as a refuge for roots during extreme drought events. And she asks if either of you know of any projects on the way to assess biochar effects on soil health, and are the processes and benefits analogous to the terra preta findings in the Amazon?
Well, I think the analogy can be drawn because biochar is a form of carbon too, and the terra preta are the residual effects of these anthropogenic activities on the soil. So definitely there are some similarities. The rates of addition are possibly very different in one and another. From a quantitative standpoint, I am not aware of any agronomic funded projects on biochar in Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
I don't
sign.
know how it is in
It's
Hawaii,
out front.
Jonathan.
I put it up. It was the sign that says please deliver.
If folks could please mute their
It's
microphones,
on the
if they're
stairs.
not speaking, thank you. Sorry, David.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jonathan.
we don't have any funded projects right now. There's been quite a bit of greenhouse work, preliminary characterizations of biochars and their impacts on soil properties, but biochar is not that accessible yet here in Hawaii. It's hard to obtain the quantities that one would need to apply at an agronomic scale. But there continues to be interest in this area, and the benefits are certainly possible, especially with water holding capacity, improving water relations, and then the biological aspects. So yeah, but no large scale projects underway, at least at the field scale right now.
All right, I think we're getting close to time, but I don't know if we have time for one more question. I've looked through, there's, different questions relating to more compost questions and about CEC and soil organic matter levels, but we have one here kind of at the end of looking at the combination of chemical fertilizers and compost and trying to understand if they help with the mineral, like kind of how to help with the mineralization of compost in relation to using compost to increase, I think, nutrient cycling. So I'm not completely understanding this question, but it seems intriguing. And again, looking at that front between soil fertility and the role of carbon.
I see the combination of fertilizers and compost as very positive from two perspectives. One is that compost may not necessarily have the nutrient content and the ratio needed by plants, but it can have the carbon that will stimulate microorganisms and promote a healthy environment. Second, if you provide those nutrients as fertilizers in the proper manner, at the proper rates, at the right time, I think it can help improve the crop productivity without damaging the environment. That's my own personal view.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sotomayor. At this point, we're at the top of the hour, and to respect everybody's time on this very special holiday, World Soil Day, I want to adjourn the webinar by thanking Drs. Deenik and Sotomayor very much for taking the time to succinctly present a lot of very good information that I think starts us off on a webinar mini-series on a great foot. If you're registered, since you registered for this, we have your email and we will send you information about the upcoming webinars, which are on the dates that were posted on the flyer. The next one is in 2 weeks, Thursday, December 19th at the same time. So we hope that we'll see you all there. And before we sign off, India or Bill, do you have any last comments? Anything I forgot?
Just to, again, thanks to all the participants, thanks to our speakers. We do have a map that shows folks from all the Hawaiian Islands and Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, and as well as the Florida Peninsula. So I really appreciate, and it's kind of exciting to have such a broad geographic range of folks and focused in on this discussion.
India, last comments?
No further comments. We're just really excited to start to bring on more producers, I believe, and to really be able to answer some of these management questions that we've been feeling isolated in addressing on our own here in Hawaii. So it's really exciting to be able to expand this network. So appreciate this initiative. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing all or most of you and some other newcomers in 2 weeks on Thursday, December 19th at the same time. Thank you.